Hi everyone, my name's Anne. Thanks for joining me on Art on the Creek. We're here in my home studio in Parker, Colorado, and I am really happy that you're here with me today. I've got a little treat for you. I hope that you will like it. Last Friday, we went up to Boulder. I went with a group that I paint with, and we had so much fun. Now, for those of you who don't know what Boulder is, it is a city at the foothills of just northwest of Denver, about a half hour northwest of Denver, and it is beautiful. Boulder is known for many, many things. I've seen it go through a lot of changes in my lifetime. It is the home of my alma mater, my dear old CU, and it's also the home of some places that are very near and dear to my heart that I went to in college, but also all through my childhood. Flagstaff Mountain, going on hikes in Chautauqua Park, watching the fireworks at Folsom Field Stadium. There's so many fond memories I have of CU and Boulder. But one of the best things that I remember about that place are the Flatirons. This is a very unique rock mountain structure, and I took a great picture of them. I wanted to paint them when we were up there. We were all done painting and we were changing locations, and then the rain started. So we had to cut our day short. I was having such a fun day doing a lot of sketchy paintings, so I wanted to capture that mood again today here in my studio, and this time I'm going to do it with Szmal Aquarius paints. I'll have a review on these tomorrow. I'm painting a few things with them right now, but the review will be posted tomorrow. So far, I'm pretty intrigued. The mixing is really one of their best features, but they're beautiful paints too. They're from Poland. So are you ready? Let's go figure out how the Flatirons look in the Szmal Aquarius paints. Here we go. Now today's demonstration is just that. It's just a demonstration. I'm going to have the review posted on this tomorrow, but I want you to see how it's packaged so we can open it here today. It just comes in a shrink wrap. I really like the cover of it because, you know, a lot of times when you're looking for something to purchase, a book is sold by the cover sometimes, and this is very attractive to artists because you can see how the watercolors are mixing and blending. So one thing that they're doing here is that they tell you which paints are used in this little abstract work of art on the front. We've got quinacridone gold, phthalo green blue shade, and phthalo blue green shade, and then an ultramarine intense. And I tell you what, that is something that is so nice. This is the first time I've ever seen this. I mean, you might think it's really a minor point, but to me, I've always been curious about, gosh, what paints did the artist use on that cover art? And now I know. So thank you, Szmal, for saying which paints were used. I have always wanted to try these paints, but the one shade that really appealed to me and drew me to this set was that quinacridone gold. I love using that as a mixer, and they've got some really good colors in here. In addition to the quinacridone gold, we've got buff titanium, Hansa yellow medium, that quin gold, and then a pyrrole scarlet, a pyrrole rubine, quinacridone red, ultramarine intense, a cypress raw umber deep, Indian red, blue ridge burnt sienna, goethite, phthalo green blue shade, phthalo blue green shade, and then finally a cobalt cerulean blue, which I really like for skies. So this is going to be a lot of fun to work with. And it looks like that goethite might be a good substitution for yellow ochre. So let's open it up and let's see what we can figure out here. Oh, I like the packaging. It's very snug in here and it's just nestled into this little outer box. So this is kind of a bespoke packaging, although I think the price was pretty affordable. It's rare that I would invest a huge amount of money in a set of paints, and I've heard so many good things about these Szmal that I really wanted to give them a try. But the packaging is just lovely. So it has a finger ring, and the tin is beautiful. It has comes with a swatch chart. Sorry, lost the words there. And that is definitely printed on watercolor paper. And here they are, full pans. And what I really like about full pans is that you can fit bigger brushes into them. Now this does feel a little bit sticky. So when I do my review, I mean, it's not a deterrent at all. It just feels a little bit tacky. I can tell that they're definitely hand-filled. But when I do my review, I'm going to take a look into which binders were used here today. I'm just going to play and we're going to paint the Flatirons. But let's go ahead and swatch them out here. We'll start with the buff titanium, and then I will put this on an increased speed so that we can just see the rest of the swatches on time lapse. Oh, I like this buff titanium. It's about the same as Daniel Smith, which is the one I tend to rely on. And this Hansa yellow light is really pretty too, but let me speed this up. The great thing about getting your hands on a mixing set is that it will incredibly expand the potential that you have with your paints. I really, really like the colors that they've chosen in here. In fact, they are colors that I do gravitate toward. The only one that I don't use too often is the Cypress Raw Umber Deep. That's that lower left. And I can tell you, I'm looking forward to trying it. These paints really go on beautifully. I wanted to test some of the granulation in things like the Ultramarine Intense and the Cobalt Cerulean, and actually that Blue Ridge Burnt Sienna should also granulate. However, this particular paper may not be the best to test that on. But look at the vibrancy in these colors, and the big plus here is they're all fairly transparent, or mostly transparent. I think the only ones that were partially opaque or not quite fully transparent are the buff titanium and the Indian red. So I think that these are going to be a beautiful set of paints. Mixing well space, you've got a lot. You have your tray pulls out as always, and then you have all of this room to mix in here. So I'll go over that in more detail on the review tomorrow. Let's get to painting. Here's our reference photo today of the Flatirons. Guys, what is it about a place that you see this view that you have known for so many years, for so long, and it takes you right back to that moment when you first fell in love with that mountain? So as you can see, I have been playing in that set for a little bit, and I just want to set it up here so that I can have that chart for reference. I work from so many different palettes that I like to keep a map. Those swatch charts that they put in there, I really like those because it allows me to remember where my paints are, which paint is which. The pen that I used, the pencil that I used rather to sketch this is Faber-Castell watercolor pencil. It's an Aubrac Dur, and this one is dark phthalo green, and I really like that because when I do the wash over the top for the sky, you'll see the green will dissolve, but it won't change the structure or value of anything that I have to do with my painting. So I really do like sketching with watercolor pencil, and they erase with a kneaded eraser very well. So that's a good tip for you. If you're looking for a sketch where your lines won't show, just use a watercolor pencil. I'm just going in with some water right now, and then I'm using that Princeton Snap 3/4 inch stroke brush. I'm going to use this brush probably for the majority of the painting. I love using these flat brushes because you can get such wide, wonderful strokes with them and narrow lines. They're just so versatile. I can get into corners, I can get I can make lines with a little bit of jagged edges for pine trees, which is what I will do here, and I can make rock faces. So the colors that I'm using here to mix, I've just already got some things on my palette, so I'm just kind of mixing some things up here. The bottom well there is the cobalt, and then I'm mixing that cobalt with a little bit of the burnt sienna. I've already got the cobalt in the sky, but that cobalt and burnt sienna is going to give me a really nice gray. And those colors, because I'm putting them into a wet surface, they're going to separate and create some really neat looking stormy clouds. I wanted to have the sky to have a little more blue in it than it did. And I like using the burnt sienna because it helps to pick up that turbulent, stormy look that the skies have. So that's why I use those colors in the sky. Just adding some more in here and just making little tapping motions with my brush to kind of keep that horizontal trend of the clouds going across. Trying to keep the top of the sky darker than the portion where it hits the mountain, because whenever you look in the sky, with the exception of a sunset, as you look up higher, the blue will be more intense in color. So trying to keep that so that it can merge and find its way in the correct value gradation that I want. And now I'm going into that phthalo green. Here is a wonderful way to make a beautiful pine color. The phthalo green blue shade, and I'm mixing with the Pyrrole Rubine. It's a PR264 and a PG7, and I just really love the deep pine that it makes. Now, if you're going to make several layers of trees like I am here, I'm changing up the trees just a little bit. I'm going to make them very, very undefined. I recommend doing your first layer in wet on wet because that will help those trees fade and fog into the background, and they will recede from your front line of trees. Just taking the rest of that green that I mixed with the red there to kind of create a ridge line for me. I'm aware that that is wet on wet, that is coming close to what I'm painting right now. So if you ever find yourself in that situation where you are working on something wet and you're getting close to something that is also wet, you're going to need to be careful if you don't want those things to blend. And I am going to just let those things sit as they are for now. I've been pretty careful so that the lines wouldn't merge too much. You can also control the amount of water that you have. And what I'm going to do with that then is I will go in with a heat tool here in just a moment and get everything dried off. But first I want to get the rocks in. Now these rocks on the left are a mix of the Indian red and, believe it or not, I'm using that Cypress raw umber. It is my least favorite color, but I like the pigment, so I'm going to go ahead and use it. And sure enough, it made just exactly the right shade for the flat irons, so I was really pleased with that. Once again, using a flat brush, you can see how easy it is to do these kinds of rock faces with a flat brush. Even if you have round rocks, you could definitely use a flat brush. You know, they come in many different widths. So I know that a lot of beginning watercolorists stick with those round brushes, but try and venture out. Try and find a new brush that you really like and play with it for a little bit. Just see which one works with your style. I really love this stroke brush and I use it pretty often. Now I'm going in, I'm going to just add a little bit of either the Goethite or the Quin Gold. I think that's the quinacridone gold. I wanted to capture, some of the warmth in those rocks. And the way that I like to do that, this Quin Gold is a very good way to do it because it is a transparent color and you can just put a wash over what you've got and then it will help that light to come in and bounce off the rocks. Because they're not a flat color, there's an awful lot of colors going on there. So I wanted to be sure and mix as much as I could. Now I'm taking the same cobalt that I had in the sky and I'm going to mix it with some of that Indian red because I want to create a very, very deep purple for the shadow side of these rocks. And I'm just going to tap it in because when you zoom in and look really closely at that photo, you'll see that the rocks they're like pizzas stacked on top of one another. And so some of that light between those layers does shine through. So I didn't want to make these shadows real dark. I just want to kind of tap them in and let the colors play on the page on that wet on wet. And I wanted to use that cobalt for its granulating properties. So I think here's the moment. Yes, I'm going to come in and dry this now and then we'll check back in a moment. Alrighty, you've got that all dried up, and as I was drying it, I did use my brush to manipulate some of that paint on that most prominent flat iron there in the middle because it was kind of getting dark in a spot and I wanted it to be able to kind of merge around. Sorry, my head keeps getting in the way. I hope that the focus is good enough for you. I thought I had this camera angle set up, but I don't have it perfect, so I apologize. And yes, I am wearing another sweatshirt in July because we have had the weirdest weather. We got a huge hailstorm last night and it's cold this morning. I mean, you know, there isn't hail out there. It's just cold because everything is wet. So I'm hoping that we get our sunshine back because the 90-degree summer temps with very low humidity is my favorite and I really want it back. But for now, I'm cuddled up in a sweatshirt down in my studio. So I hope wherever you are, the weather's cooperating. I've heard a lot of stories about how it being kind of weird all over the United States. So wherever you're watching from, I hope you're having a lovely month of July. I'm going in with this phthalo green and the quinacridone gold mix. And that, I really like using that PG7 with the quinacridone gold. And again, this is the quinacridone gold hue. It's a PY150 with a PO48. So with that orange tint in there, you're going to be getting a kind of green that looks as if, let's see, if you are underneath some trees, some deciduous trees, on a cloudy day, there's just enough light for those trees to look as if the light is coming from the leaves. That's the kind of green that you will get when you mix that phthalo green with the quinacridone gold. Try it. If you have these colors, I recommend definitely trying that mix because for foliage and vegetation, it will definitely serve you well. So I'm putting in the first layer here. I know that the mountain is darker than this with the spruce on it, but I want to get a first layer in because I'm going to be very loose with these trees. I don't want to paint every single pine tree, and I don't want to go into a lot of detail. I really want the star of this show to be those Flatirons that are coming out. But I do need to have some differentiation between the peak and the sky. So I will need to go darker here so that it will contrast enough in value from the sky, and you'll be able to pull that mountain away from the stormy clouds. So here I'm going in once again with that phthalo green and the pyrrole red mix. Really love that for pine again. And another one, if you don't have these two colors, another really great mix for pine is like a hooker's green and a dioxazine purple. If you have those two colors, that will also make a really nice pine for you. So this mix over here on the left, that was the mix that was the phthalo green and the Hansa yellow. But I'm going to go ahead and add more Quin gold to it so that I can stay consistent. It's just that I've darkened that green over there on the right, and I didn't want to add to that. So I'm going to use the green on the left of my palette now for my lighter green. So you can see I'm using that edge of the brush to kind of tap in some suggestions of trees, but not everywhere. This is a really good way for you to create a little bit of message to your viewer of your painting that that's exactly what's going on there is trees, but you certainly don't need to paint each and every tree to get that message across. In fact, when you do something like that, you run a real risk of overworking your painting. This is something that I personally really do have to be consciously aware that that I run the risk of overworking my art because I love painting. I just love it. And that's when you get to the point where you can just get too much going on your layers, and you'll notice it if your painting is overworked when it loses its luminosity. So that's kind of what you want to keep thinking of when you're working with watercolor, is how to keep things sheer, how to keep it loose. Let that light bounce completely through all of your layers of pigment from the white of the paper and back to your eye. So I wanted to put some gold right up against the foothills there to kind of cover that back layer of the green that's in there. Adding some more of that green mix over here to this side. I'm just kind of playing with different values of green at this point and really just having fun. Going wet and wet, just filling in wherever I can, just kind of getting a good base of a varied light green. I didn't want to do a flat wash of a green, I just wanted to keep it really varied. And now I'm going to mix more of my little pine mix here and tap in more of that pine tree. This is such a great way to make pines. If you haven't done it yet, just take a stroke brush like this and just kind of tap and just get those branches in. I really love doing this on the sides of paintings to frame photos because fortuitously a lot of the pictures I take are peekabooing through pines, and it's very easy to frame a photo that way. And this one was no exception. So now I'll go over here on this side and kind of put in some of the leafy trees, and so my my pressure with the brush is changing. It's a little bit more forced to it so that the lines that I put down are going to be thicker. And we'll put a little bit of this Goethite down here because I am in love with this color. This Goethite is one of my favorites. It's a PBR, but it does not have a pigment number. So I have a feeling that it is just that Goethite itself as a mineral. And it's really cool, you guys. It granulates very, very well. And I want to use it as much as I can in place of yellow ochre because it's like a yellow ochre that is transparent and granulates beautifully. I mean, what more could you ask for? So I'm going to tap several different colors on top of one another as I'm doing this, and I'm just going back and forth on that left side of my palette there to create different values of that quinacridone gold and phthalo green blue shade mix, and just kind of trying to really get in there, create a bunch of different shades of green, still going through just basically with the same motions on my brush, just creating that foliage. And since this is wet on wet, but when you're dropping a concentrated area of pigment, you can really establish very soft foliage, and I really like this technique. So this is a lot of fun. I'm just having a blast, actually, putting a little bit of a lighter layer now in front of the pine so that some of the shadowed pine can be towards the back. And now we'll go ahead and add some more on the other side. I'm just kind of tapping in more dark values in front of the light values and just trying to get a lot of mixing going on the page. This palette is called a mixing palette, and there's a reason for that. All of these colors really do play together nicely, and that's kind of, it's amazing to me that you can get 14 colors like this and create such a wide array of colors, and you have all of this at your disposal. So what's really nice, oh, here, we're going to dry this again. There we go. What's really nice about having all of these colors that you can mix in a single palette is that you can let them mix on the page. Just the fact that they are mixing, and you've got such a nice array here of quinacridones, of colors that granulate, and that buff titanium, so that you can create a full range of muted palette. It really opens your ability as an artist to create a lot of different styles of work. Now today on this video we're painting the Flatirons, but when I do the review of these paints, I'm going to do something much more bright and tropical, and you'll see you've got quite a lot of ability with this 14 full pan set. I really like it. I like how the paints go on. I can see myself grabbing this set many times in the future, and in fact I think it would be great to take with me, because for landscapes there's just about every color in here that you would need. So this would be a really nice plein air kit to have as well. And like I said, the size, I don't think the size is a deterrent. Since these paints are honey based, you want to make sure that it doesn't get left in your backpack though, because it might fall vertically, and then with that, the honey based paints, they might have a tendency to be a little bit more sensitive to temperature changes. So for instance, if you're in a really hot area, or if you leave your plein air kit in your car, which I don't recommend doing, but it can happen, you don't want those honey paints to just become real liquid and create a big mess in your pack. I've never really seen them become super liquid. Let me know in the comments if that tragedy has ever happened to you. Thankfully, it has not happened to me. But then again, I'm very conscious of where I leave my paints, and I really try to not leave them in my car, because as you probably know, temps in the car can get pretty hot. It is finally time to put in some details, and I've just grabbed a number 2 brush here. Frankly, I thought I was grabbing a liner, but it's a number 2, which is fine because I can get a good enough line with this, a delicate line for these fissures in the rocks. I have mixed in the Indian red, because that is the red that I used on the rocks initially, with that cobalt, which is the blue I used in the sky, and that's also, remember, the color mixture I had for the shadows in the rocks. And now I'm adding those fissures in, because really what they are is a cleft that is creating a shadow. So the other big takeaway I have for you on this painting is that when you're using a palette, don't feel you have to use every single color in the palette, but when you do work from a palette like this, stick with a few colors and see if you can get by with using less versus more. So in this one, the colors that I used were the quinacridone gold, the pyrrole-rubine, a little bit of that cypress raw umber, Indian red, burnt sienna, a little bit of goethite, the phthalo green, and that cobalt. So those are the ones that I used to create this piece. If you're thinking that you want to go for a new color in your painting, think again, think twice, think if it's something that you can convey either by creating a very thin wash of the colors that you already have, that is to say the colors that you've already used in your painting, or if you just really can't come up with the correct shade, then decide if you'll be able to use that color that you want to add later in your work to kind of keep that harmony going. Everything that I've done here in this piece was used with those colors, so I was able to use the same green that was in the mountains in the foreground, etc., etc., etc. And I think that that's important to create a cohesive look to your work. So I am titling this Storm Over the Flatirons, and I'm writing Boulder, Colorado, and then I'm going to write July 23 and sign my name. I recommend that you sign your name to all of your pieces. Be proud of everything that you do. And go ahead and put at least the month in the year, because that will let you know where you were in your art journey when you did that piece. So you can save your paintings. There's lots of folios you can get for them, and look at them like photo albums and really enjoy your progress. So here we go. Here are the Flatirons in my interpretation using the Roman Szmal Aquarius set. Thank you so much for hanging out with me, you guys. I really hope that you enjoyed this today. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 9 a.m. Mountain. I will release the review of these paints. Spoiler, they're lovely, as you know. But I'll get more in depth and tell you a little bit more about them at that point. Thanks so much, you guys. I hope you all have a very creative week, and I promise you I will take you to Boulder on a plein air this summer, if the weather ever clears up. Take care, you guys. Bye now.